Hey guys, welcome back to the Cerebral Palsy and Fitness podcast. I'm here with Curtis Burke. He is a podcaster, and today he's going to share his story about how he's overcome a learning disability, a little bit about his upbringing, how he came about podcasting, and what prompted him to move from his hometown of Tennessee to LA, and much more. Welcome, Curtis.
How are you, David? Thank you for having me, sir.
Good, good. I'm great. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. How are
Thank
you?
you. I'm good. I cannot complain. It's a lovely Sunday in Los Angeles, and I'm here.
It is, it is. I don't know if it's sunny over there, but I know it's sunny over here, sunny and
hmm
84 degrees here in Florida.
Yeah, well, you're in Florida. I'm in LA. I don't even know what the temperature is, but it's a nice day. It's always a nice day in LA. It was raining yesterday, but it's good today. So yeah.
Hey, good stuff, brother.
hmm
So, to kind of start up this podcast, tell me a little
hmm
bit about your background.
I was born in Charleston, South Carolina. And I lived in Charleston, where both my parents are from South Carolina. My dad is from Charleston. My mom is from Clinton, South Carolina, Lawrence County, which is also another part of South Carolina. We moved to an area called Kennesaw, Georgia, which is like 25 minutes outside of Atlanta. When I was in middle school, I think I was 13, and that's where I spent my later teenage years. And then, as you mentioned earlier, I went to school in Tennessee. I went to Nashville. I went to Tennessee State and got my bachelor's in speech communication and theater. And then I moved back to Georgia, and then I moved to LA. So that's my background. Two parent household. I'm the middle child of three kids. I have an older sister and a younger brother.
That's fantastic. I
Mhm.
have I have two younger siblings and a younger brother. I'm the oldest in my family.
You know, this yeah. I mean, I guess I should say too. I'm married, which is important, and I have 2-year old boy girl twins. Yeah.
Oh, boy girl twins. Wow, that's impressive.
Yes. Yeah. It's a lot.
That's good though, because if you're thinking about it, they'll grow up together and then
Yeah.
it'll be less stress for you once they're ready up and ready to move on, when they're
Yeah.
older.
I mean, they always have a play date. That's the beautiful thing. And me and my brother are close in age, but it is a different type of closeness when you're literally born the same time with somebody else. You go through everything together. So yeah.
Yeah, you feel all kinds of emotions together. You go through
hmm
uh positive events, negative events together, and it's pretty awesome to be able to experience that yourself firsthand.
Exactly. Just to watch them go through it is an experience that I didn't think I'd ever have.
So you mentioned to me earlier that you struggle with a learning disability. Could you
hmm
share a little bit about what that learning disability is or what you were diagnosed with?
Sure. So back in Charleston, they never could diagnose it with anything. I got tested for being on the spectrum autistic. They said I was not autistic or on the spectrum or anything like that, but it was just where I think my brain just learned differently. And so when I started first grade, I was a visual learner. And a lot of times, when you start first grade, you have to, especially with boys, we're a little more hyper and our brains everywhere. And so I actually got held back in the first grade, which
Mm.
was devastating at first because in Charleston, I was in a community of a family community. It's like a village. And so when I get held back, it was everybody knew about it.
Oh
The other kids could
no.
see it. And so I remember having to explain why
Mm,
I was being held back another year. But at the end of the day, I just was not ready for school like
yeah.
a lot of boys. And I think if I had tackled it earlier, maybe a lot of things could have happened, right? Maybe if I had started school earlier, or we were home with a nanny versus in daycare, and so that may have delayed some of my learning curves. And I probably needed a tutor, but I think a lot of times when your kid's in the first grade, you think you don't you don't want to get them a tutor already. It's kind of like either you can do it or you can't kind of attitude.
Yeah. Did your
Mhm.
parents ever how did your parents feel when you were in that situation of being held back, and how did they overcome that adversity with you?
They never showed to me that it was something that they were ashamed of. It was something that I felt like once it was brought to their attention, I feel like they weren't in denial. I think probably before that, early on, they may have been some missteps, but I feel like once the teachers had brought it to their attention that, hey, he didn't catch on. Because I remember that I I think the teacher was going to allow me to move forward, but my mom was like, no, like if he is failing 3 classes in the first grade, he needs to be held back. But I didn't find out until after the fourth grade that I had a learning disability. I just was a kid who struggled in school. And my second year in the first grade, I made all A's and B's. I did fine in the second grade. The third grade is when that trouble started happening again, where I really started to struggle. And by the fourth grade, it was pretty much displayed that I needed to be tested for something because I needed additional help. And so I would say going into the fifth grade is when I actually changed schools, which I that was probably harder than repeating the first grade. I had actually because I had a learning disability, the school that I was going to did not have the necessary um
Accommodations.
hands-on accommodations that there you go, accommodations that were needed for someone with my learning skills. And so I transferred, and that was really hard because I had to go to a different school than all the other kids in my neighborhood, and I had to catch the bus at a different stop
Oh,
point. And in the South, everybody catches a
oh yeah.
school bus.
Oh
Like you
yeah.
walk to the school bus, and
Yeah,
so
yeah.
that was it was difficult because I was that started, I think, fifth grade started. It started planting seeds, I feel like, in how I am even today, how my thought process is today. And it was very difficult because it was not only that I go to a different school, now they're saying I had a learning disability, and what did that mean to all of us? And we could not identify what that learning disability was. And so the teachers didn't know what to do with me.
Did you ever experience I guess some form of bullying because of your learning disability by your peers when you were growing up?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was when you are isolated and you feel like when you're in your fifth grade mind, I was definitely bullied, and there was times where I probably was the bully. You know what I mean? Like because it's survival, you want to fit in so bad. I remember when it was time to line up for school, I would always wait to line up very, very last because I didn't want people to see me going in that classroom. And the classroom I remember was called 4E, and I was in the fifth grade. And I used to just wait on the playground. And like me, you've talked before. With me, I think it was the opposite. I think it wasn't a physical disability that I had, and so people did not understand why I was going to this class, and so it was more of a mental thing for me. And so I would use it to my advantage. I would try to act like I was normal. I would try to know my sports. I would try to bring the football and to school or to basketball, whatever it was, um, to not stand out. And so people would make fun of me a lot, with that. And I think that it implanted something in me that I would never forget, like just why are you going over there? Or you with slow kids and things like that. And so it started the ripple effect of learning quickly how to adapt and how to survive as a young kid. Yeah.
Yeah, and especially um if you put it this way, think of it this way. You're a minority. You're
Mhm.
struggling with a learning disability,
Right.
and you're among your peers. And like you said, it makes it worse when you think about it that way because hey, he's different because he talks a certain way or he
Mhm.
does things quickly. and he's a minority. The reason I bring that is because I deal with kids. Most of my boys are
Mm-hmm.
minorities that I work
Mm-hmm.
with. And
Mm-hmm.
some of them, they're in special, they have IEPs, they're in
Mm-hmm.
special classes. And I have to
Mm-hmm.
remind them that just because you do things quickly or you do things a certain way or you look a certain way doesn't make you
Mm-hmm.
different. It makes you unique. It might
Mm-hmm.
take you an hour, a day to do something, but you'll still get it done. And not only
Mm-hmm.
that, but if you take the time to explain to your peers what you have and how it makes you unique and sometimes how you need some help, trust me, there's some that will be willing and able to step up to the plate and assist you or be alongside you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think it kind of just like you said, being a kid of color, um, and you not wanting to stand out. You already stand out as it is. In the school that I went to, it was a predominantly white elementary school and the middle school and my high school. And so I think just like what a lot of athletes do, because you look a certain way, you're able to hide a lot of your disabilities based on your appearance. The way I talked was sounded very educated. I carried myself like I was very educated, but I still had a learning disability. And so I think people just did not know what to do with me. And being, like you said, a kid of color, I think a lot of times when you're a person of color, a black kid or a Latino kid, a lot of times they just don't know how to help us learn because you're coming from
Right.
a different environment of survival. And once you hit in the fifth, I say like fifth grade, you're really starting to learn what color means and how that what that looks like in your home and in your community.
Right, right. And that's where uh you yourself, I don't know if you after I guess as years went by, you're like, I need to take this moment and start advocating not just for myself, but for others out there that don't have a voice. And I
Hmm.
think that's where you decided to be like, you know what? I might have a learning disability, but I'm going to
Hmm.
use this test to my advantage to
Hmm.
teach others that it's okay. It's okay to be different.
Yeah, I always found myself reaching back. I feel like, you know, I think there was a lesson that I learned in all of this. I think that's what a lot of times I find myself wanting to be, or finding myself um, wanting to be friends with people who don't fit the stereotype of how they look or how they think. And I feel like because I went through that, a lot of times people may not, when they look at me, may not realize that a college educated black man with a bachelor's and a master's was held back in the first grade and had a learning disability starting in the fifth grade, you know, legally. I had an IEP as well. And um, a lot of times what I've learned is you can't read a book by the cover.
Exactly.
And so I think because of that, I've had to peel back the layers and it makes me understand those kids who are the popular kid who may be struggling just as myself.
And you'd be surprised that the popular kids that struggle,
Hmm.
and I've had a couple of those before, while being an assistant teacher and an advocate,
Hmm.
I look at them and I'm like, "You're struggling, aren't you?" And they're at
Hmm.
first they're in denial. They'll be like, "No, I'm
Hmm.
not. There's nothing wrong with me." I'm like, "Buddy,
Hmm.
I already know it's okay. You can be honest with me. There's no one else
Hmm.
around. You can tell me if you're struggling with
Hmm.
something.
Hmm.
You don't have to hide, you don't have to mask yourself
Hmm.
in this fake persona. It's like do you know about Emil Durkheim?
No.
He is a sociological theorist who
Hmm.
came up with this term front stage and backstage.
Hmm.
So the front stage being, you let's say for example, you're performing up on stage, you're a
Hmm.
famous singer or an athlete, and you have to project yourself a certain way to get the crowd going or to get the crowd to notice you,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
it's not the actual you, you're an entertainer. You're entertaining audiences.
Mhm,
However,
mhm,
you go backstage and you turn off that entertainment, your entertaining self, and you become this calm family man. You care about others, about your
mhm,
family, your friends, and that's your that's actually the real you. You don't have to
mhm,
hide that. That's you.
mhm, mhm,
So it's like with these kids, to fit in, they'll get onto this completely different persona of like, I'm cool, I got these cool jackets, the latest Jordans, the top of the line, everything. And I'm like, dude, that's not really you. I know you because I see you and I know the way that you act. And I'm pretty good at reading body language. So
mhm,
it's like, you don't have to hide none of that from me. Like, I got some kids that'll act really hard. They'll act like
mhm,
they're quote unquote thugs and gangsters. And I'm like,
mhm.
dude, you're not hard and you're not gangster. I can see right through you. So it's okay. It's okay to cry. It's okay to feel emotion.
Right.
It's fine. That's you. I want the real you, and that's where the backstage and the front stage come forward. I don't know if I explained that really well,
No, you
but
did. It's a lot of times we're all chameleons, right? And a chameleon, we act different around our parents, or our teachers, and our friends, and so it's just about how much of you are you really letting be displayed. Or it's the same thing with actors. A lot of times you think you know somebody because they were in an action-packed film, but then when they get home, lights and camera actions are off, and you're a family person, and you kind of describe me like I like for me like people assume that I'm an introvert, and I have been, but now I've become such more of an introvert now that I'm married. I just like to me a good time is staying at home with the kids, and once they go to bed, have a beer or a glass of wine. Like that's
yeah,
exciting for me. that's
yeah.
like that's my if they allow me to like have that, if they don't get
Indulge,
up.
right?
So right, exactly. So
Yeah,
that's where
yeah.
I am. That's exciting for me. And I think it is hard, like you said, for like the hard kid or the popular kid because you do get overlooked. People don't assume that you have a learning disability, and because they judge a book by its cover. And a lot of times, if your cover doesn't look how they perceive it to should look for someone with a learning disability, you don't get the necessary help or assistance that you may need unless you are a person that can speak out and be an advocate for yourself. And that's something I had to learn along the way is because you will get lost if you don't. And I would say by the time I got in high school, I think things started to change for me once I got in high school. But that elementary and middle school was devastating.
It
But
was it was pivotal, right? You were
it
trying to
was
find yourself.
trying to find myself. I'm isolated, trying to hide the fact that I had a learner disability and the fact that I had been had to be placed in special ed, which was something that I even this day I had a conversation with a friend. She said she didn't even know. She never knew that because I didn't tell people. By the time I got in high school, I was mainstreamed out in most of the classes, and I found um, great teachers that were advocates for me. Like if I didn't have them who would speak up for me and give me a chance and mainstream in those regular classes, I don't know what would have happened. And so I had to find somebody who would be a voice for myself. And then I became my own voice once I saw that others would be an advocate for me.
And it's funny that you mentioned that because a lot of the times when you talk about uh voices and things like that,
Hmm.
you deal with this notion of someone tells you, "Oh, well, I never saw," like you mentioned earlier, you're like, "I never saw you disabled." I'm
Hmm.
like, uh, and this kind of is one of my pet peeves is like, you say you never saw me disabled, but you know I'm physically disabled. It's
Hmm.
okay. You don't have to say, "I never saw you disabled." I am
Right.
disabled.
Right.
I am.
Right.
It's okay. Just
And that's
just say
fine.
it. Just be
Right?
honest. Just be honest. Don't
it's
sugarcoat it.
it's not a curse word. It's okay, right? It's the almost kind of like it's like when people say and this is a pet peeve of mine, Dave, when people say this, I don't see color. Well, I want you to see my color. I want you to be able to see my yellow
Right?
skin, my black skin, your, you know, like it's kind of like, but you do see that I'm black. So it's not it's not a bad thing. When you see David, you do see that there is a physical disability. That's okay. It's fine. It's not a bad thing, you know. And so I think we have to just retrain our brain, um, because that is like my pet peeve. I think people say, "I don't see color." Yes, you do.
Yeah.
If I'm, you do. You see that I have a beard. You see that I'm a man. You see that I'm a black male, and that's a good thing, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's
Mhm,
something that it's still to this day when it comes to society, it's hard to still it's becoming hard to accept,
mhm,
to embrace. And I think it'll always be something that'll always be overlooked. And the only
mhm,
way that'll change is that people like ourselves who really get out there and
mhm.
just display it, just
Mhm.
talk about it.
Talk about it more. Yeah, and I have to talk about it more. And just like you said, I think people, their heart is in the right place, kind of like your friend, how you were mentioning, but it's not doing you justice if we deny it. And so I think a lot of times people think that they're helping us out and they're being a better friend by saying, I don't see your disability, or you don't look like someone that would have a disability. Well, what does that look like? You know, so um, and there's different types of disabilities. So,
Yeah, like I told my friends is if you really want to help me by advocating about the disability.
hmm,
What I told you before about it, tell others about it. Tell them about my
hmm,
cerebral palsy. Tell them about what I have, what makes me
hmm,
unique, and why, we're friends.
hmm, hmm,
Obviously, I'm not you're not just my friend because, I look a certain way, but because I do things, you know, as well as I can,
hmm,
or the best way to help somebody is just to pass along that information you give them versus saying, "Oh, he's not disabled," or "Oh, he's not I don't see like you said earlier, I don't see color."
hmm.
No, right?
Please see my skin.
Like
Right.
you see him, he might be black, but he's not different. He's not different. It makes him
Hmm,
unique, but he's still
hmm.
human.
Right.
I'm disabled. It makes me unique. I
Hmm,
might look different, but I'm still human.
hmm, hmm. Exactly. Absolutely. Yeah, I think we have to learn how to be inclusive and accept the
Right,
differences that we all have, and that's okay. I think it's just a learning curve for everybody. Um, and it's old school, right? A lot of times, our parents would, you don't mention this, or you don't mention that someone has a disability or physical disability. You act like you don't see it. I think it was a way of them feeling like they were accepting of you, but it kind of hurts you because you may not get the help that you need because people are afraid to approach you. They may be
right,
afraid to ask you if you need help. Um, and so it's a learning opportunity for all of us. And everybody's different. We're not
right,
one-minded. You may be okay with somebody helping you up in a wheelchair, but somebody else may not be. And so I think we all have to learn to have those difficult conversations and find out how all of us, what we need from each other when you have a friendship.
right. And for you, I know you went to college for
Mhm.
was it speech? You said
So I have my bachelor's in speech communication and
speech
theater.
communication. So I wanted to ask you,
Hmm,
considering that it's speech communication, how was
hmm,
that transition for you? Considering that your learning disability involved
hmm,
speech and
hmm.
I mean communication in general. How did that come
It
about?
was that's a great question. That it was difficult at first. It really was because I was not supposed to go to college. I was not on the path to somebody who I was supposed to be a black person that would just kind of go through the system If
Oh,
I was
okay.
lucky, go through high school, and that was good enough. Maybe go to a community college, but because I graduated from high school and I went directly into a 4-year university, it's not really known for that to happen for someone who has a learning disability in my particular case, and I had to
Yeah.
work really, really hard. I luckily, again, I had, and I wish I knew the lady's name. She was an advocate for me because I had a learning disability. I had a full all my tuition was paid, and they
Wow.
allowed me to have additional um I had an IEP, and so when I took the SAT, I had extended time on the SAT, and I forgot the other one, the SAT, and whatever other one you had
The
to take,
ACT?
ACT. And when I took certain tests, I was allowed to have longer time. I couldn't have all day, but I got extended time, and I was able to have tutors. I learned really early on to sit by the smartest person in class and be friends with them. I really did.
Right.
Like I would, and I learned that I had to sit in this first or second row of class. And people would ask me why I was sitting there, but it was something at first legally, I think they had to place me if I wanted that, but then I started placing myself in the first and second row of each class because I needed to pay attention and I needed to sit by the smartest person in class. I needed to sit by someone who could take notes and can help me understand their notes because my brain was more like, I want to listen to you, but if I'm writing notes, I wasn't able to listen. So I would learn to buddy up with someone in class and say, "Hey, can I see your notes after class?" And so that way I could have the visual of of both, and I would just get study buddies. I mean, I stayed up a lot of nights struggling, and but I overcame it. I thrived in college for the most part, and I was in social organizations, and it was a great time. And it was something that was not supposed to happen, but I think it was in my DNA also. I come from I was one of the lucky ones. I come from a legacy of parents who both have bachelors. My sister was already in college. My grandmother, my maternal grandmother, had a bachelor's. All my uncles and aunts went to school, and so I saw it firsthand. But if I didn't come from that kind of family generation who went to school, I probably would have fallen off the waist. And so it was
Right.
very important for me, for myself, to show that I could live up to not only their standards, but the standards of myself, that I could do just what everybody else was doing in the family. And so I was driven. It was like a fire burning in me that I wanted to have exactly what everybody else had. And there was no reason why I couldn't as long as I had additional help. And that meant a tutor, maybe additional time on some testing. I had to maybe study longer than than Bobby or Becky. They may could have looked at it and studied for 30 minutes. Well, I may have to study for 2 hours to get it. So yeah,
Right, right. And look at you. It paid off, right?
it paid off. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And the fact that you're here today, and we mentioned color earlier, as
Hmm.
we know, like statistic wise, when it comes to uh children of color or Latinos in general,
Hmm.
they don't get very far. They
Hmm.
versus someone who's, you
Hmm.
know, but it's great to see that you overcame those odds and to kind of continue on. What prompted you to move from, I guess, from Tennessee
Atlanta
to
from
Atlanta
Atlanta.
to Atlanta
Hmm.
to was it from Atlanta to
Hmm.
Tennessee and then to LA?
So it went from Atlanta to Tennessee, where I went to college, and then I moved back to Atlanta for 2 years, and then I moved to LA. So it went from Atlanta to LA.
Wow.
So yeah, so after college, I moved back home like everybody else, and had to lick my wounds and realize I needed a job. So I was in Atlanta for for 2 years after college, thinking,
What was your first job, if you don't mind me asking?
yeah, MCI. I was working at a call center, David, at MCI in Alpharetta,
Wow.
Georgia, and I thought I had made it because I was making $13 an hour, and you couldn't tell me because I was supposed to make 12, and he said because I had a bachelor's, he was gonna pay me 13. and I thought I had, I thought I was rich. $13 an hour in 2003 was a lot
Right,
of
right.
money in the
Yeah, right.
South, so but I worked hard and I ended up hating that job and I'm getting fired from that job, thank goodness,
Oh,
because it was a sales job. And because I am a people person, I felt like I wasn't having the right integrity for what people wanted. It turned into, for me, like everything was an upsell. And it went from me just wanting to help people who needed help with their phone service to me trying to sell a long distance to some 85-year-old lady who really didn't know what she was getting. And
oh man.
I just couldn't do it. It turned from okay, we got that problem solved, but let me tell you about this international plan, blah blah blah. And I just wasn't good at it because I knew that I was selling things to people who did not need it, and they ended up letting me go. Thank goodness. Um, but I actually forgot about this, David. I worked at a place called Devereaux, Georgia Treatment Facility in Kennesaw, and I think that's where I really started to accept my differences because I worked with adolescent boys at an institution where a lot of them had learning disabilities or behavior problems, came from single parent homes, and they lived there. It was a institution for kids that were between the ages of like 12 to 17. And I actually, after the first 90 days, after getting spit on and called everything from a child of God, you know, um, I actually liked it a lot. I really did. Like, I mean, yes, they would, yell at me and curse at me, but I think because I saw myself in a lot of them and their challenges, I actually did well there. It was like, yes, I'm physically restraining a kid right now and putting him in the padded room, but I like this better than, lying to an old lady on the phone about why she needs long distance when all of her relatives live in the same town as her.
Right.
So why did she need to call out the country? Um, but I felt like I was able to like make a change and I was able to have a voice. I got paid to teach and to be a role model for kids who were different, and I loved it. Um, and I made less money too. I remember I made from 13 to like I think it might have been like $9 an hour. I thought I was broke, but because of that, in short, after working there for like a year and a half, I was really attached to the kids, but I knew that because what I saw what they were going through, I needed to live my own life, and I moved to Los Angeles literally within like 2 weeks of making that decision. I moved to LA to pursue acting, and but
How
that's
how
what
how was
pushed me.
that for you? Like how was that transition from going from
hmm
where you were before or
Georgia
from
to
Georgia
working
to
working at
to
Devereaux. It was at first it was scary but exciting because it was a brand new start. I had saved up money, I packed up my car, and me and my brother drove across country. And I thought I was gonna be famous in 2 years. I was like, "You're not gonna tell me I'm not gonna be famous. Like 2 years, my name is gonna be on the lights and cameras, and I'm gonna be able to tell my story and blah blah blah." And then reality hits you again, and it kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier. Your out of appearance doesn't necessarily show what who you are on the inside and what you're ready for. And so I thought because I had a certain look or I acted a certain way that people were just going to like want to book me, like I was special. But you got to do the work, and I think a lot of times people think that they can lay on a certain look that they have, and it's not the case. There were a lot of other light skinned black men that were taller, better looking than me, who were better actors than me. And so it was a hard pill to swallow that this is not as easy as I thought it was going to be. And um, it just was not the path that I found out that I need to go down. But I did do a one man show out of that called The Stamp of Approval. And it talks about having a learning disability and moving to Georgia and still going to college. At the time, I didn't have a master's, but it talked about that how all of us go through life wanting stamps of approval from other people, and some stamps
Right.
are needed because this is how you can get a job, and other stamps of approval are what we want to be accepted. Yeah. And
Yeah,
so
and
I
I,
traveled with the show too. I actually saw I did it in Atlanta, I did it in LA, and it was a beautiful thing.
awesome, awesome, man. And it's like you reminded me of this thing that I read about. Do you know Jamie Foxx?
Yes, I know who Jamie Foxx is.
Early on in his career, from what I read, I'm not sure how accurate this is, but
Mhm.
when he started trying to get roles, his name was not Jamie Foxx. And every time he'd go after a role, he'd get denied over and over and over. Why? It wasn't because of his color, it was because of his name.
Mm,
Because it wasn't or wide enough,
mm,
as we can put it. Because so
mhm.
he took it upon himself one day to look up. I guess he had seen names on a piece of paper. He saw Jamie and he saw Fox, and he's like, "Wait a minute, I'm gonna put down Jamie Fox." And what do you know? His career trajectory started turning around, all because he changed his name.
His name. Yeah. Yeah, I
It,
mean,
and
it's yeah, that's interesting. I mean, because a lot of times you will be surprised why certain people get in the door and why others don't. It can be based on a name, it can be based on your complexion, it can be based on whatever. And so those opportunities, when they do come, you got to be ready for it. And with acting, a lot of times I think people rely on a certain look and they're not ready. Jamie Foxx had he was ready. He had the good look. He didn't have the right name, so he
yeah,
changed. So yeah,
and it stuck with him,
and it
as you can
stuck with
see.
him. Yeah, absolutely.
Sometimes you have to make those. It's about sacrifice. You have to make the sacrifices, make those changes, in order to succeed in anything you are trying to work on.
hmm Yeah, you have to be open to be flexible to make certain adjustments. And once you get to a certain level, then you can be a voice for the voiceless and a role model for people and pull back and help others. But you got to get there first. You have to be humble. And you have to do the work.
Yes, exactly. And speaking about work, how did you come up with the podcast that you do? The Uncovered Legacy, right?
Yes, sir. So the podcast, I came up with it, Uncovered Legacy, just about everything we've talked about, really, because I once I did a DNA test, make a long story short, and in the DNA test, I was trying to find out who I am, where I come from, and I hit a wall and it got frustrating. And then I had kids, and then I wanted them to be able to understand their own legacy. And as I look at myself, I'm looking at them. They're half me, half my wife. So it was important for me for them to understand where they come from and who they are because it helped them with some of the barriers that they were faced. And I got frustrated because I said, wow, if I was Jamie Foxx, if I was, a famous person, Denzel or somebody, finding your roots would be, begging me to be on the show. And because I don't have a high following, I have to hire a genealogist. And so I just got so frustrated. I said, this is not fair to people who don't have a strong platform, who aren't famous for their stories to be told. And I was just like, or even what society considers a interesting story. So everybody from the cook to the president has a story to tell, and we can all learn from those stories. And
Yes,
so I
that is correct.
learned that and how those stories impact you and who you are today. And so as I was uncovering my own legacy, now being a father, having a master's, and being married, I was peeling back the layers of myself. And that's how I came up with the name. And so I felt like everybody should have a place where they can tell their stories and where their stories should be honored and told and how they became who they are today and who they're growing to be. And so it's the uncovered is like you're peeling back the layers and you're figuring out who you were, who you are, and who you want to be. And so that's how I came up with the name. And so you've been a guest on the podcast,
Yes.
season 3, episode 7, I believe.
Yes, that's correct.
So,
Yes.
and your story, not to change it from my podcast, yours, but you're someone who has a story to tell, and people should hear that story. And it's not all about one thing; it's about several layers of who you are, I am, and so I have a lot of different guests on it.
Is it and I'm sure you've every guest that you've had has taught you something new. Is that right?
Absolutely, absolutely. It teaches me something new every time. I mean, every I would say they're all testimonies. All of the guests have testimony and are brave souls to share their testimony because it is a scary thing to get out there and tell your story. Um, and I've learned about how a lot of my guests have just been brave and the things they've had to overcome to get to where they are. Um, it's it's a lot of triumph. And I've had several guests in there who talk about death, and out of those death, they have arrived of, they've started a new journey in life. I've had guests on there who talk about being molested or starting their own production company or being a teacher in schools and how other teachers have impacted their lives and their grandparents impacted their lives and in adoption and fertility and all type of things. And so out of those things is kind of like an aha moment where you're finding who you are and how your roots, your ancestors have helped you in different ways that you didn't even realize it. So yeah, so that's what is called uncovered legacy.
Speaking about uncovered legacy,
Mhm.
where do you plan to take this within the next 5 years?
I'm going to be honest with you. I want to be a full time podcaster on somebody's payroll. I'm going to put it out there. Like, I don't want I'm not just doing this to do it in my backyard. I want to be able for others to learn from it. And I want it to be a full time job. I really do. I want it to get bigger and better and where it can be, where I could show and I
Right.
have the opportunities to have somebody's grandmother be a guest and who just because she wasn't famous doesn't mean that you can't learn from her story.
Right. You and I have something in common. I'm aiming towards that goal myself. And
Hmm.
on top of that, I like to grace the TED stage one day.
That we're both in that bucket list.
Yeah.
That is something that um is like above and beyond the TED talk. I think for people who want to talk and have a testimony, and you would be great for that.
Yeah, and it's a way to really expand our not just our knowledge, but our network and reach a whole new audience. And it's it might take some time, but I feel like we'll
Mhm.
both get there. And
Mhm.
it's funny because I had a friend who brought up this point that a lot of us content creators, um, we create all this content
Mhm.
and we put it out there and people watch it. But
Mhm.
there's sometimes where you feel like you're not getting the recognition you feel like you should get.
Mhm.
And we try to get on these shows and then we think we're gonna get some sort of compensation.
Mhm.
And of course, I don't do anything for compensation or money, but it
Mhm.
would be nice to really get out there. And if you want to make this into a full-time career,
Mhm.
sometimes you have to know what you're worth, you know?
Mhm. Mhm. Absolutely. I mean, you hit it on the nail, David. It's the same thing for me. It's sometimes you feel like, well, I can speak for myself. I feel like sometimes, oh, nobody's listening. Nobody cares. Why am I doing this? This is a bootleg podcast. This is but then I get like an email from somebody or a call from a friend of mine who I know and say, I really needed to hear this today. I'm going to, start a new job because of what I heard on your podcast, or I'm going to go back to school, or I'm going to call a family member. And it's like, it seems like it's always right on time. The moment I'm like, why am I doing this? Nobody cares. And I get that one person to motivate me and keep me going. And I will say this, I feel like season three is the first season where I feel like I've started to do like interviews and get a little more recognition. And so, but I had to do the work. I
Yeah.
cannot expect to be on the same level as certain podcasts who I look up to. Danny Shapiro of the Family Secret podcast is one of the podcasts that I really started off admiring. And I she was probably one of the reasons why I started the podcast. And then a young lady named Sarah Ventry, who was actually on this season, she was the first podcaster who already was what I call made it kind of, who told me that I could do it. And she told me I could do it before I even knew what microphone to buy or knew that I had to wear a headset, knew how to record it. And her podcast is called Unfinished Short Creek. And so I those two are the main two that probably motivated me to start my own.
Yeah, it's also an interesting point is not just getting yourself out there, but if you have connections that support you, other podcasts and they're willing and
Hmm.
able to get you out there like myself, I
Hmm.
don't hesitate to help
Thank you.
a fellow podcaster in need. We support each other. At the end of the day,
Hmm.
us podcasters, depending on where I'm on your show or my show,
Hmm.
I I I don't know about you, but I see it as kind of like a family in a sense, your extended
Yes.
family,
Hmm. Hmm.
and you're there to help each
Yeah,
other.
absolutely. I mean, like I said, every season, I go back and I listen to all my guests. It's almost like you do feel like a family, and the people that who agree to be on your show, I feel honored. I feel honored to come on your show because you didn't have to put me on your show and take a chance on me, and so um, it goes back to my childhood when I think about having that learning disability. It's about putting your best foot forward and not being ashamed and saying exactly what you need and what you want in life. And it will come for you if you keep putting in the work and you keep surrounding yourself with like minded people like yourself, as you said, the podcast family.
Yeah, and trust me, but and most doors open when you support those smaller podcasts or content creators. You never know that
Hmm.
that person who you interviewed
Hmm.
or that person whose podcast you were on, they
Right.
could they could be a potential door for you to move to the next level.
Exactly. You never know who's working from you behind the scene. It could be I could have one conversation with somebody. I could say, "Oh, David, David Figueroa, that's who you need to speak to," or vice versa. Curtis, it's just that's why it pays and it to be kind to people because you never know who is working for you behind the scenes.
Yeah, and and it pays off when you're also, like I said, you're putting someone else's name out there because you're helping each other be successful versus it's just you all the time. It's so and the thing I tell people is this. I might have a podcast, but it's not about just me.
Hmm.
It's not about just what I do. It's about the people that I have on the show. It's about their experiences. And to be honest with you, what makes a podcast successful and you successful are the people that you have on.
Hmm. Absolutely.
They help you become successful, not just
Right.
yourself.
It takes a village. It really does. It's about them being brave and them wanting to tell their stories, and it pushes me along. I would not be sitting here with you or anybody if people did not agree to be a guest. Yeah.
Right, right. And it's been a pleasure having you on today. Like it's been a whole lot of fun. This
Thank you.
conversation and 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 like I said, it definitely pays off to actually have that good circle to be able to be an advocate for those who don't have a voice, and just
Hmm.
to live life and be positive and be happy,
Hmm.
and just to just enjoy what you do.
Thank you, and I hope hopefully your guests will get something out of this to know that there was a little boy in Charleston who still thrived, who graduated from high school, who went to college, and who now has a master's. And if I can do it, trust and believe you can do it too. So yeah, thank
Exactly,
you.
brother. That's what it's all about. If individuals like us with disabilities can do it,
Hmm.
you can do it too. And
Exactly.
if you're looking for this podcast, you can find it on Apple, on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and every other podcasting outlets out there. And I will see you next time. Take care.
Thank you.